He's a weak person, and what he's trying to do is get a reduced sentence.
I didn't know Robert Mueller needed protection.
Manafort is clearly putting all his eggs in the Trump pardon basket.
I doubt he'll see the light of day until he's very, very old.
Everybody who says, why don't you listen to the tape, unless you speak Arabic, what are you going to get from it?
I'm pissed.
I was asked to be here, and here I am.
Yesterday, General Motors announced it was closing 5 factories and laying off 15,000 workers. The news is a gut punch, a gut punch.
Brutal. Brutal.
All the bells had rung, all the songs had been sung. And so now the vote just has to come in.
No matter who you voted for today, I'm going to always represent every Mississippian.
Just because people are quick to criticize you does not mean you're doing the wrong thing. Take it from me.
We are in the majority. Majority, majority, majority.
The Republicans are in control of the presidency, the House, and the Senate. A shutdown is on their back.
The type of deterrent being used is OC pepper spray. It's natural. You could actually put it on your nachos and eat it.
I know as well as anyone that reading the world news can often be a real downer.
Touchdown confirmed.
Fair, balanced, and unafraid. Here's Martha. Hey, Martha.
Thank you very much, Brett. So tonight, dinner is now underway at the G20, capping off a day that included a bizarre moment between Putin and the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, and, of course, one of those juicy hot mic moments as well, that one including the French president. Still, it is President Trump's dinner tomorrow night with President Xi that is front and center. But as the anticipation of that meeting builds, there is another story that is gaining traction tonight in China. This photojournalist, known for capturing the darker side of communist China, has vanished for weeks. His wife now says that she believes the Chinese government is involved. In fact, no country has jailed more journalists than China. This, of course, drawing comparisons to the death of Jamal Khashoggi earlier this month. In moments, Ambassador Rick Grinnell with how the president is juggling all of this. But first, Trace Gallagher live in our West Coast newsroom with the backstory tonight. Hi, Trace.
Hi, Martha. The missing photojournalist is Lu Guang, a U.S. green card holder who splits his time between New York and Beijing. Guang has won numerous awards for capturing images that China considers, quote, sensitive, like coal miners, AIDS patients, and drug addicts, the so-called victims of China's economic rise. But now Guang's wife says he hasn't been heard from since November 3rd, when he was supposed to meet with fellow photographers in a remote province of Xinjiang, an area of China that has recently been the subject of international concern over reports that the Chinese have built internment camps there to conduct, quote, re-education of Muslim Uyghurs and other ethnic groups. An estimated 1 million Chinese Muslims have reportedly disappeared into those camps. In fact, some say it's the biggest mass internment of civilians in the world today. A former detainee told NBC it's like prison conditions with political indoctrination, including patriotic songs and lessons in Chinese loyalty. Beijing calls the camps job training centers, and human rights organizations argue that in the wake of those negative reports, the Chinese government is trying to shut down information coming from that region. And now the Associated Press says Chinese officials have confirmed that Lu Guang and a colleague were taken away by Xinjiang state agents. The director of Human Rights Watch reportedly said, quote, the Chinese government has a long history of simply taking people whose views it doesn't like, literally off the grid, and disappearing them. The Committee to Protect Journalists has now called on China's government to clarify what happened to Lu and allow him to travel freely. Last year, Lu Guang said the reality in China is that you never know if you're going to get in trouble because there are no written rules. Lu's wife, who's here in the U.S., has now set up a Twitter account to spread information about her husband's disappearance. Martha.
Trace, thank you very much. Here now, Dr. Michael Pillsbury from the Center for Chinese Strategy at the Hudson Institute. He's the author of the book, The 100-Year Marathon, China's Secret Strategy to Replace America as the Global Superpower. And Steve Hilton, host of The Next Revolution. Welcome to both of you. Dr. Pillsbury, let me start with you. Your take on this story and how similar is it to what we saw with Khashoggi?
Well, the important difference, Martha, as you know, is that Khashoggi did not have a green card. He didn't have a wife in the United States complaining. But The other really big difference is it's one thing if it's Saudi Arabia, something else again if it's the world's second largest economy. And there's still an enormous amount of goodwill toward China in our press and academic circles. So I don't expect the outcry to be as great about Mr. Liu. It should be greater, actually, but it won't be as great as with Khashoggi, who is sort of an employee of the Washington Post. This wasn't supposed to happen, Martha. As you know, 40 years ago, the great dream that a few people, Donald Trump being one, myself as another, writing books saying this would not happen. We lost. The mainstream still is pro-China. So I'm kind of pessimistic about Mr. Liu.
Yeah. You know, you think about the fact that there is a lot of backlash, Steve Hilton, about meetings with Putin or not meeting with Putin, meeting with the Crown Prince, not meeting with the Crown Prince. And yet, as Dr. Pillsbury points out, you know, nobody is saying that about China. And yet they are a huge violator of human rights. And you look at the fact that there's 1 million Chinese Muslims estimated to be in essentially what's described as work camps. And you hear not all that much about it.
Absolutely right, Martha, and it's so fantastic that you are giving this story the prominence it deserves and bringing some of these facts up, because we don't hear it enough. The truth is that the Beijing communist regime is the world's worst authoritarian dictatorship, and it is getting worse, not better. We were told a story, just as Dr. Pillsbury was saying, was that the more we engage with China, the better it gets. It's the opposite. It's got worse. There's not just those internment camps, it's the way that they imprison and torture their political dissidents, and they're now using technology to assert their authoritarianism in a really Orwellian way. They've got this social credit system which monitors the behavior of every citizen, and they get punished if they don't do the right thing. In the world today, China truly is the evil empire.
Dr. Pillsbury, you wrote a book about the motivation of China to replace the United States. It's not that they want to open relations, according to your writing, and, you know, sort of join us with this in a leadership position in the world. They want to replace us, and they do it in ways in their country that are very dissimilar to the beliefs that we have in this country. And it's a military offensive as well as a technological offensive, and, you know, imprisoning people in human rights violations.
Well, I think the reason President Trump has several times now called me the leading authority on China is he's read the book, and he had similar views way back 18 years ago in a book he wrote. But there's just been a few of us like this, Martha. The main thing is our books get mocked. I was demonized 4 years ago when the book came out. Opinion is moving closer to Steve Hilton and me and President Trump. But there's still this hardcore of supporters of China inside our system. And we have to hope that, Martha, your own coverage will help move the needle. But I remain, I think it's in doubt what's going to happen tomorrow night on Saturday, because there's so much pressure on the president from what Peter Navarro has called the global billionaires, who are his donors, his friends, and they're saying stop the tariffs, this trade war won't work, somehow China will behave more rationally in the future. And this is the same thing with arresting journalists. This wasn't supposed to happen, but can we really prove that he's disappeared? He's been gone several weeks now. You know, you can see how the other side, from Steve and me and President Trump, and I hope you, Martha, too, we're kind of outvoted by the billionaires.
Well, we're certainly asking questions that definitely need to be asked. A quick thought from both of you on how the president should approach this question of trade and how much hardball he can play in this meeting tomorrow night. Steve, and then Dr. Pillsbury, please.
Look, we talk about a trade war, and that's true. The trade issue is a bad one. You've got the trade deficit. Much more serious has been the persistent theft of intellectual property and abuse of the World Trade Organization rules. But you know what? This is bigger than a trade war. This is a Cold War, and we wanted to stop it from being a real war, and that means you've got to keep up the pressure.
Dr. Pillsbury, final thought.
Well, one thing the president can do is sort of pocket the very few concessions the Chinese have already made to him. They're afraid of him. They've written that he's the smartest American president in history. They have made some small offerings to him. He can thank them in some sense for that, but still go ahead with the tariffs. That's what I suspect is going to happen.
We'll watch. Gentlemen, thank you very much. Great input. Good to have you both tonight. Many thanks.
Thanks, Martha.
So Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, something of a pariah at the G20 amid accusations that he ordered the brutal murder of journalist Jamal Khashoggi. But he does appear to have one friend there, Vladimir Putin. This viral video of the two strongmen high-fiving and yucking it up today comes as neither one will be sitting down with President Trump. Putin's meeting was canceled last minute over the tensions with Russia's role in seizing Ukrainian naval ships. Here now, Rick Grinnell, U.S. Ambassador to Germany. Ambassador, good to see you tonight. Thank you very much for being with us.
Thanks for having me.
So let's dive right in here. What do you make of that exchange and that very sort of light, jovial moment between Putin and MBS?
Look, I think it was deliberate and very disturbing. It was clearly inappropriate but intentional, and that's what makes me uncomfortable about it. Look, we just have seen the Khashoggi murder, and we've seen the Russian aggression in the Kerch Straits, and this is activities that the international community needs to call out. And so this jovial atmosphere I think makes everyone very uncomfortable, but it seems very intentional, which is the disturbing part.
It's fascinating that you say that. You know, it looks somewhat spontaneous, but it's your feeling, having been through so many of these sorts of meetings and get-togethers, that there's no way something like that would be spontaneous?
I think they clearly know that they both are under scrutiny of the international community. They're in a club, one of the best clubs of the world, the most elite clubs, and these are two that are under a lot of international scrutiny, and so they're sticking together.
What about the fact that the president declined to meet with both?
I was very proud to see the president do that. When the president decides to not take a meeting, I think that sends a very strong message. He was clear on why he wasn't taking a meeting, and it's appropriate for the U.S. to take this strong position. Look, here in Germany, let me make one point clear. The Russian aggression in the Kerch Strait is a really prominent moment, maybe perhaps the most prominent moment that we've seen in this buildup of Russian malign activity. It sends a very strong message to the Europeans that they should not be doing having a normalized relationship with Putin. We certainly do not need Germany or others to be buying gas from the Russians. The Nord Stream 2 pipeline should be shelved. This should not go forward. This is a clear indication that the Russian aggression is only going to get worse, and it can be sporadic, and it's uncontrolled. And so this is a lesson, I think, for the German chancellor and for her government to really look at this Nord Stream 2 pipeline and say, I don't think that we should give the Russians more influence over the energy in Germany or in Europe.
I mean, that's very interesting. And, you know, these two individuals, MBS and Putin, are on opposite sides when you look at the situation in Yemen, for example. And yet, perhaps the shunning of both of them is driving them closer together.
You know, that may be true in the G20 setting, but they're very different countries with very different relationships with not only the U.S., but really every European country. I think that when they come together at the G20 and there's this club, they both feel the pressure of the international community and the eyes are on them. And so there was this kind of camaraderie between them, as disturbing as it may be.
All right, let's take a look at another moment. This is Emmanuel Macron of France and Mohammed bin Salman of Saudi Arabia. Let's watch.
President of the Republic of South Africa.
I mean, you know, it's a little tough to hear, but he's saying, Emmanuel Macron says, you know, I'm worried. And MBS says, you know, you shouldn't be worried. And Macron says, I'm a man of my word. And MBS's sort of way is that he's kind of smiling a little bit. Macron looks very serious. What's the dynamic behind that exchange?
You know, it's really hard to tell from the video and certainly from the audio. Let me just say that I think that the pressure is on the Saudis to come clean and to investigate and to prosecute the murder of Khashoggi. It's obviously extremely troubling to the international community and to everyone who is watching. But we need to make sure that we have partners where we can. I like the president's approach of dual tracks when it comes to countries like North Korea or Iran or Russia. These dual tracks where we're very tough, we have sanctions, we make our positions very clear. But President Trump is also sending another message, which is, I'm willing to talk and I'm willing to sit down with people who will change their behavior. We've seen it very successfully in North Korea so far. Look, there's a long way to go. I get it. It's not a happy ending yet. But we are on a track where we have the sanctions, we're pressuring the North Koreans, and we're trying to get them to the table. They came to the table and made some promises. That is a step. I think the same situation is going on with Russia. We have the toughest sanctions on Russia. We've seen their activity, their malign activity, become worse over the last couple of years, and President Trump is sending a strong message. We want to talk to you, but the behavior has to change. I think we're sending the same message with the Saudis.
One last question for you, Ambassador. Your name is on the list that's being discussed as a possible replacement for Nikki Haley as ambassador to the UN. Is that a position that you would be interested in coming home and taking?
You know, I'm going to give you the standard line, which is we serve at the pleasure of the president. But let me say one thing. It is a true pleasure to work for this president on foreign policy issues because I think we are making so much progress. And so anyone who gets a chance to serve in any role, any national security role, is lucky to be a part of this team. And so, you know, I leave it to the president. He decides where people go.
All right, Rick Grinnell, thank you very much. Good to see you, Ambassador.
Good to see you, Martha. Thank you.
So coming up next, unbelievable new images showing the aftermath tonight of a massive 7.0 earthquake striking the Alaskan coast.
We felt a rumble come through. We knew exactly what it was. We ran outside, you know, the trucks shaking back and forth.
Let's be honest.
Back earthquakes rocking Alaska's largest city of Anchorage this evening, including one that was a 7.0 magnitude, causing people to duck and cover. Roads split in two as the people there briefly faced the threat of tsunami. Dan Springer, live in our Northwest Bureau tonight with the story. Hi, Dan.
Yeah, hey, Martha, this was a major quake, even in a state used to strong and frequent earthquakes, and they're not even close to assessing all the damage. It happened at 8:30 in the morning and lasted for over a minute. The earthquake was centered in Point McKenzie, just about 5 miles north of downtown Anchorage with its 280,000 residents. The damage is extensive and widespread. Roads buckled, water mains were snapped, power was knocked out to tens of thousands of people, although they are restoring a lot of that power tonight. A tsunami warning was issued, but later canceled. The airport was completely shut down, but it too has reopened to plane traffic. The Trans-Alaska Pipeline, which runs 800 miles from Prudhoe Bay to Valdez, has been shut down as a precaution. So far, no reports of any damage to that economic lifeline. Hospitals had water damage from broken lines, but they managed to stay open. And amazingly, there are no reports of a spike in serious injuries. But it was scary and dramatic. This video was recorded on the 6th floor of the courthouse in downtown Anchorage. You see people ducking for cover. There's a lot of damage reported at homes in the area, shattered glass, things falling off of walls. Wasilla's own Sarah Palin, the former governor from Alaska, and John McCain's running mate, of course, put out a social media post that her family is intact, but her house is not. That is the case with many Alaskans. They are feeling lucky to be alive, like Raven Maitland, who was driving in his truck in the dark when the earthquake started. He stopped and bailed out, and as he was doing this, the road he was on, which runs right along a frozen lake, collapsed.
The whole ground's opening up in front of you. It's like, is this time? Is this the day? And you kind of get out of I got out of the truck and I started running the other direction, trying to look and make sure that there was no other, places on the ground opening up.
The regional head of FEMA is on his way to Anchorage. The governor, Bill Walker, declared a state of disaster. President Trump says he is monitoring the situation and praying for those affected. The good news in all this, at this point, no reports of any deaths or even life-threatening injuries, but it's still early. The race is on, of course, to get power restored to thousands of Alaskans who are dealing with temperatures in the 20s. Martha?
Wow. Thank you very much, Dan Springer, tonight in Alaska, on Alaska. So also breaking tonight, the woman at the center of Florida's controversial midterm recount now out of a job tonight sooner than expected. Governor Rick Scott suspending Brenda Snipes before she could retire earlier. Scott saying in part, quote, after a series of inexcusable actions, it's clear that there needs to be an immediate change in Broward County and taxpayers should no longer be burdened by paying a salary for a supervisor of elections who has already announced resignation. Chris Starwalt is our Fox News politics editor who joins us tonight. Chris, what's your reaction to this out of Florida tonight?
Spite is a thing. Look, she, at the beginning of this whole process, she says, no, we're great. We do everything great. Even Democrats said Broward County has a hysterically terrible history when it comes to the governance of elections. So what are you talking about? And watching her sort of unraveling, this woman who was appointed in 2003, I believe, 2002 by Jeb Bush to replace her predecessor, who he removed for incompetency and misfeasance. So she had been there all this time. And then she was ready to say, I'm probably not going to run again. And then she was ready to say, actually, I think I'm going to quit in January. And Scott was not going to give her the privilege of leaving with her head up. He's going to send her home in humiliation.
Well, he got some for not removing her before all of this, given some of her prior records. So maybe he felt that that the time was now, and that it would be good for her to take an earlier leave. Chris, I want to get your quick thoughts on a couple of other things. I'm fascinated by the Hillary and Bill Clinton tour, which has now kicked off, and it kicked off in Canada. Apparently, about half of the arena was unsold, and the tickets, which were originally supposed to go for hundreds of dollars, they were, selling to people for as cheap as $17 in some situations. But it didn't stop Hillary Clinton from still stoking the fire that she may run again. Watch this.
You're on a 13-city tour, the two of you, President Clinton, Madam Secretary. Now, is that because you guys just want to hang out together? Or is it because you're testing the waters for a run at being President of the United States?
Actually, Frank, I'm thinking about standing for Parliament here in Canada.
My favorite part is that Bill Clinton, puts his hand on his head like, oh my gosh, it never occurred to me that anybody would ask us that question. That's not why we're here.
Who would have thought? Who would have thought that anything like that would ever be said? Look, I think The Onion may have had this one the best. The Onion headline was, Hillary Clinton says she'll either going to raise $100 million in donations or she threatens to run for president a third time. Democrats they used to be sick of her. They're scared of her. They're scared that she's actually going to run again. And I can't tell who she's trolling more, Republicans or Democrats. I think she's trolling Democrats harder.
We'll see. Michelle Obama's also out there on tour and doing quite well,
they like her.
Actually.
Yeah,
Chris,
they like her.
Thank you, Chris. Great to see you tonight.
You bet.
So coming up next, a vile threat made by a Democratic state representative in Illinois.
I would like to make him a broth of Legionella and pump it into the water system of his loved one.
Her Republican target of that threat coming up next to respond. Who does this? After an ugly scene on the floor of the Illinois State Legislature, Democratic State Representative Stephanie Kifowit, I think is how you say her name, decided to handle it this way by wishing this on her political opponent.
I would like to make him a broth of Legionella and pump it into the water system of his loved one so that they can be infected, they can be mistreated, they can sit and suffer by getting aspirin instead of being properly treated and ultimately die.
Wow. Kifowit initially claimed that her words to GOP Representative Peter Breen were twisted and misrepresented. Hard to make that argument. She did later apologize. Here now, the target of Kifowit's attack, Republican Illinois State Representative Peter Breen. Peter, what on earth were you guys discussing that prompted that response?
Well, and we were discussing how to set the limit for the Court of Claims, so for lawsuits against the state. We had some veterans, some wonderful heroes of ours who were infected with Legionnaire's disease at that facility. So you've got a few dozen veterans, and some of them even died. So we wanted to get as much money to them as we could and quickly. But the bill in question was about the thousands of lawsuits against the state of Illinois. And so the matter was really where to set the dollar amount. And so when Representative Kifowit came out with this vile attack on me, it was really out of left field. I mean, we were really, do we set it at about $500,000? Do we set it at $2 million? That was really what the terms of the debate were.
Yeah, I mean, that seems like a logical discussion, obviously, that you would have in the legislature. How did she make the argument that her words were twisted? I mean, I think everybody just heard her words come straight out of her mouth.
Well, and they were clearly prepared remarks. And there's the sort of thing, look, if someone on my side of the aisle, so I'm the Republican floor leader, if someone on my side of the aisle was doing that, started that speech, they wouldn't have finished it without me in their ear, getting them to apologize and retract those remarks immediately.
So was there any response from her colleagues saying, look, that's really over the line, or were people cheering her on? What was it like in there?
It was difficult. So I'm listening to this, and I'm just beside myself. And at the close of her comments, there was applause from some of her Democratic colleagues. And I'll tell you the response later that evening. I had one Democrat out of 67 who came and apologized to me. But even to this day, there has not been a single elected Democrat I know of in Illinois who has publicly condemned those remarks.
Well, someone on your side did. This is Jean Ives. Here's what she said.
How dare you concoct up some sort of story about brewing up some batch of Legionnaires and having him feed it to his family? How dare you take an honest debate about an issue and then wish death on my colleague Peter Breen, his wife, and his 2 adopted kids?
So I know you lost your election. What is next for you, sir?
Well, I'm going to go back to work. So I work as a constitutional attorney, so I will continue to do First Amendment, free speech, religious liberty work. I'm going to continue advocating for fiscal responsibility, small government, the sorts of things that was why I went into the Illinois General Assembly. Yep. So I'm going to keep that up.
All right. Sir, thank you very much. You'll even stick up for her right for free speech, I would imagine, even though you find it inappropriate. Good to see you tonight. Many thanks. So a warning about the video that you're about to see. It is disturbing.
So a tree falls in your brain.
New details in the case of a Colorado husband and father who once pleaded with the public for the safe return of his pregnant wife and daughters, but who we now know, after this stunning video confession, is the cold-blooded murderer who killed them all. Trace Gallagher joins us live from our West Coast newsroom with the full story tonight. Trace.
And Martha, before we show you this new video released by the Weld County District Attorney's Office, it's important to know the context here. The video is from August 15th, 2 days after Shanann Watts and her daughters Bella and Celeste had been reported missing. At this point, Chris Watts had denied any involvement in their disappearance, telling investigators he wants his family back and insisting he does not know where they are. But he also failed a polygraph test. And when Chris Watts' father enters the room, Watts paints an entirely different picture, telling him he found Shanann choking his children, so he retaliated. Watch.
She hurt him, yeah. And then I went out and her. I freaked out.
Chris Watts then tells his father he doesn't want to admit to police that he knows where they are. Watch.
I freaked out when you said me. How was it? You know when they do all the bodies off?
Prosecutors say Watts strangled his wife for at least 2 minutes and then, despite what he told his father, suffocated his daughters. He then loaded the bodies into his truck and drove them to a work site where he buried his wife in a shallow grave and stuffed his daughters into oil tanks. According to court documents, the day he killed his family, he also called his daughter's school to tell them they weren't returning and contacted a realtor about selling his house. A co-worker of Watts later came forward to say they'd been having an affair. Chris Watts finally admitted killing his family and will serve 3 consecutive life sentences. Martha.
Incredible. Unbelievable. Trace, thank you very much. So next up, we brought you the story of Paradise High School and all of the students, including most of the football team, who lost the homes that they grew up in during the California fires. Tonight, a man who took Giving Tuesday to heart and gave $1 million.
He doesn't even know us, but he has it in his heart to give this money to us, to just help us. And it kind of makes my heart smile.
This brand new video just available tonight of one man's near-death experience in the California fires. Even given that, he stopped to save others.
County 13 is back. Hey guys, walk towards the left. Are they coming for us? Come on. Watch out, watch out. Yeah! Can we get in? Yeah, come on. Come on! No, where's the Get in.
Unbelievable. I mean, if that bulldozer wasn't there, those people would not be here to tell their story. And also tonight, another hero has emerged through all of this. We introduced you a couple of days ago to the members of the Paradise High School football team. We're grateful at that point to be helped by strangers.
Me and my buddy got to stand next to Joe Staley, and he was like a mountain of a man, and he was just so kind. Me and that same buddy of mine, Henry Becker, this lady bought us 2 jackets for free, and it was incredible. I've just never been so blessed from a tragedy in my entire life. It was amazing.
We were so impressed with those young men, and in fact, nearly 900 students from that school lost their homes. They haven't even been back in yet to see what was there and what's left. So just this week on Giving Tuesday, a man with no connection to the school opened up his wallet and his heart, personally giving every single person connected to that school a check for $1,000 apiece. Businessman Bob Wilson joins me now. Bob, thank you so much for being here tonight. It's great to have you with us. I know you say that you've been very blessed with success in your life, and this is actually the kind of thing that you do often. The people who work with you say, what moved you in this case to say, let's cut $1,000 checks for all of these families?
Let me just say this, that, they say that money cannot buy happiness, but you're talking to the happiest guy on the planet. I'm not talking about the kids. I'm talking about myself. I couldn't be happier with what you might say I did for these kids who aren't able to enjoy high school like I did. I'm 90 years old, and yet I still have these fond memories of high school. And I just wanted them to hopefully get just a portion of the happiness that I enjoyed when I was in high school.
Well, I mean, it's an amazing thing that you did, and we watched some of the faces of these children, and you definitely brought them that joy. I know that you have some businesses in that area, and you feel connected to that part of California. Talk to me a little bit about what went through your mind when you saw all of this devastation.
I've never been to Paradise in my life. I don't know anybody in Paradise. I don't know any of the kids, but that didn't make any difference. I just thought maybe some guy 600 miles away could maybe put a smile on their face and just for a few moments or maybe hopefully days, take their mind off the trauma that these kids have been through. And if that is the case, that's all the compensation I want, and so it's just been a remarkable odyssey, and I've enjoyed every minute of it, especially being with the kids.
Well, I know they enjoyed being with you, too. You can see it in the smiles on their faces, and we know that this generosity is something that is kind of a regular thing for you, sir, when you know that somebody's in need. And we thank you very much, Bob, for being with us tonight. We really appreciate it. All the best to you.
You're quite welcome. Delighted to be a part of it.
Coming up next, a Christmas classic taken off the airwaves.
I simply must go.
Baby, it's cold outside.
The answer is no.
Baby, it's cold outside.
Some say that song is too dangerous for our daughters to hear. My Ladies' Night panel takes it on, coming up next. Some shocking video that has just come to light. We want to warn you, this is difficult to watch. It is NFL star running back Kareem Hunt of the Kansas City Chiefs at the time, caught on camera kicking, pushing, and then shoving to the ground in this altercation in this hallway in a hotel, a 19-year-old woman. The incident took place during a dispute at that hotel back in February, we understand. It follows other reports of abuse from players within the league. Most recently, former San Francisco 49ers Reuben Foster, who was arrested earlier this month on a domestic battery charge. He was cut from the team, only to be picked up by the Washington Redskins days later. And of course, we all remember this video, former Baltimore Ravens running back Ray Rice hitting and then dragging his fiancée out of the elevator. Commissioner Goodell saying at the time, quote, "The same mistakes can never be repeated." This is awful to watch all of this, but it keeps happening, unfortunately. Joining me now, our Ladies' Night panel, Lisa Booth, Elizabeth Wagmeister, and Wendy Assefu. Welcome to all of you. Good to have you here. Obviously, when you look at these situations and the players who get into these trouble and then get picked up by another team after they are kicked off of the team they're on, and you just want to say, what is the message that the NFL is sending here? I love football, but you have to have rules and standards, and if people defy them, they have to be kicked off.
Well, it should be pretty simple. You don't hit women, and if you hit women, you're no longer in the NFL. And I think the NFL should do what they did with Ray Rice, suspend him indefinitely. The team should fire him. He should no longer be able to play. It shouldn't be that difficult. And I think the problem is you've got so many of these players that are held up on pedestals their entire life. They're treated like gods. It gets to their head, and then they go out and they think they're invincible and they can do anything. They have to be taught a lesson, and they shouldn't stand for it. And I think there are plenty of great guys in the NFL. You've got the Nick Foles, Benjamin Watsons of the world that sent a great message to men around the country. But people like him, Kareem Hunt, should be fired, should be let go, and they should send a message to the other players that this is not acceptable in the NFL.
And this happened a while ago. He was playing with the Chiefs. Reuben Foster, as we said, the 49ers released him. He was then picked up almost right away at the end of November by the Redskins, and that really doesn't send a great message. Elizabeth?
It doesn't send a great message at all. It sends a terrible message. What it's saying is that the NFL appears to be turning a blind eye because they want to protect their players. Of course, their power is in their players, but they have the power to fire these men. And when you see a video like that, there's no other thing to do other than to fire them.
Yeah, it was interesting. There was some pushback on Twitter, Wendy. I was, going through some of the responses, and some people are saying, it wasn't that big a deal what happened in the hallway there, and they're sticking up for him. What do you think?
This is beyond the pale. If a man hits a woman, or if a man even hits another man that violently, that's a character issue. And what the NFL is saying here is that the league, the players, are bigger than their individual responsibility, and that's a problem. And I just want to underscore the fact that the NFL does have a rule for domestic violence. It says for your first suspense, you should be suspended for 6 games. The only player that has ever been applicable towards is Ezekiel Elliott. Yeah. No one else has been able to be suspended, and they have a textbook example that says this is what happens. And can I just say, because you guys know I'm the left-leaning person on here, we continue to have people who commit domestic violence in the NFL, but Colin Kaepernick is not in the NFL. And that's all I'm going to say here. I'm done.
All right, we'll pick that up again another time, I'm sure. But I want to get to this little piece of video from Melania Trump at Liberty University earlier this week. Watch this.
Well, they would like to portray different stories and focus on different unimportant stuff, really. And I'm here to shine the light on important stuff and talk about the things that I can help.
She was talking about the opioid crisis in this country. And Elizabeth, I just want to show the little bit of interview that you did with Chelsea Handler, which got an enormous amount of attention. Let's watch that.
What about Melania? Would you have her on your show?
Melania? What, to talk about what? She can barely speak English.
So it's clear the media does not like Melania Trump. That interview was with Chelsea Handler about 2 years ago, and as you said, it went viral. And I don't agree with what Chelsea Handler said. You know, I was doing my job as an interviewer, asking her the question, but the media just really gangs up on her. They treat Melania differently than they treat other women. Now, a most recent example is actually quite frivolous, but Melania Trump was gardening at the White House, and she was wearing 5-inch Christian Louboutin heels, and the media had a field day saying, why is she wearing $900 heels to do outdoor work? Well, then a few weeks later, Meghan Markle, the royal, she showed up at a basketball game in heels, and all the headlines were, wow, she can do anything. So that just shows the difference of media coverage. Melania Trump looks great. Who cares if she's gardening?
All right, I do want to get to this last topic, and we always have too much to cover in too little time. This song, which we all grew up listening to at Christmas time, let's play it.
Records on while I fall.
The neighbors might
But baby, it's bad out there.
say, what's in this
No
drink?
cabs to be had out there.
I wish I knew.
So, in what some might say is a little bit of a hypersensitive move, one radio station has pulled this song, and they say it's not a safe song because of that line and his, wanting her to stay. Wendy, and then Lisa?
It's a double-edged sword here, because I believe that if one person is offended, then we should make sure that everyone feels comfortable. However, we cannot go over the line with what is our Christmas traditions and our Christmas music. I do not personally think this song is offensive, and even the poll that was taken for the radio station shows that the listeners don't think the song is offensive. So I say, keep on playing it, but if it offends you, then feel free to turn it down on your own radio.
And I think even more broadly, why do we keep taking away a woman's agency and keep portraying women as victims? She chose to stay. She chose to have another drink. If she wanted to leave, she would have left. It was cold outside like it is now. She wanted to have a drink. She's probably attracted to the guy, and they were having a fun night. So, why do we keep taking away a woman's agency?
She kind of liked him.
She has a choice. Yeah.
Well,
Seems like she liked him.
The other problem that I have, and I don't listen. I don't listen to this radio station. I don't live in Ohio, but if they're playing a lot of the rap music that's out there now, right now Kanye West has a song.
No. Let's not
We're
go
going to finish
there.
this conversation afterwards. We gotta go.
Lyrics on the radio.
All around.
Rap music.
Thanks, ladies. That is the story on this Friday night. Everybody have a great weekend. Baby, it's cold outside. We'll see you back here Monday night at 7. Tucker's up next.